I will go back and go through that again. Remember, just like our orthographic projections, we're taking something that exists in 3 dimensions and flattening it out into 2 dimensions. So in this case, we're taking a shallow depression, a slope downward, and we're showing it in 2 dimensions. So again, on a contour line, these are elevations. Let's assume they are in feet above sea level. So every point on this line here has the same elevation of 900 feet. Again, I'm on figure 8.5 on page 139 of the textbook. So 900 feet, 898 feet, right? So these contour lines are at 2-foot intervals. And a way to visualize what's actually happening here is they drew a section line, section AA, through the contour, and then plotted these same elevations on the y-axis here. And every place that that section line intersected with a contour line, it came down right perpendicularly to the contour line or to the section line, drew it down and put a mark on the graph there, connected those dots, and that gives some visualization of what the natural feature is that's being described by this set of contour lines. So in this case, the natural feature is a depression, and we might have trouble visualizing it with the contour lines, but when we draw the section, then we can see a little more clearly what's actually going on. Right? So again, here, this is figure 8.6 in the textbook. We see the line, the elevation of the contour lines diminishing, right? 894, 892, 890. So this indicates to us that we have we're going downhill, we're going into a little valley or depression. And again, the same exercise of drawing a section and plotting that section tells us exactly what's going on here, or gives us a better indication of what is going on here, what's actually happening. Right? If you were standing on this piece of ground, it would make perfect sense to you what's going on because you just look down the hill. But if you're looking at these contours on a plot plan, it may be a little bit more difficult to visualize. Right, here's another example where the numbers are going downward. So this is not a depression, it's a little hill, a mound. So again, if you can't picture that mound from the contour lines, you can go through the same exercise. Draw the section, connect the dots down, then you would see the same shape on a cross section, which allows you to visualize what's going on in reality. Yes, it would. They're calling it a cross section, so yes, I would say that's a good way of describing it. Here's a residential site plan on, this is figure 8.8 on page 141. Again, it's a little hard to read here. Let me Give me a second. Let me bring it up someplace else. Let me just let me switch. I don't know if that's any better. Let me just point out some of the features here. So this is figure 8.8 on page 141, and I'm just blowing it up a little bit, so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. So again, we across the top here we have our property lines. So they have a bearing, right? Bearing south 89 degrees, 43 minutes, 37 seconds west. So again, that's a line that's almost due west, right? Due west would be south 90 degrees west. So you see a bearing and a length 289 feet, 289.00 feet. So that describes that bearing, and dimension describes this back piece of the property line. You see some contour lines here in 1 foot increments, right? 856, 857, 858. 849, 850. So, and on the plan here it shows Woods Creek, so we can kind of visualize there's a creek running about this way, right? And the water, they have a little arrow here, but I'm going to guess that's the way the water is going to flow, because this is, right, if you follow the line around, well, hard to see, this is 853, 849, right? So this depression is sloping slightly downward that way. So if there's water in here, it's going to flow from from up to down, right, high to low. You see a 50-foot easement off this rear property line. We'll explain what an easement is in just a minute. Here's our building proper, and this 857 would be the elevation of the first floor, right? 856.5 is the porch, 854 is the garage, right? So you've got to step up 2.5 feet to get from the garage to the first floor, step up 1/2 foot from the porch to the first floor, and you see that the first floor here is 855 contour line kind of running, and 854 kind of running through the house, 856, right? So the first floor elevation is going to be a couple feet above the prevailing grade. Does that make sense, how I'm seeing that? The other things to see here is that they are distinguishing between existing grade and finished grade. So in this case, existing grade would be what the land was like before this property was built, and finished grade would be what the grade or the contours are after the contractor with the backhoe or the bulldozer has their way on the site. So you see that especially here we've changed the contour here, right? So we've taken I'll have to think about this. So we've excavated a little bit here. We've changed the contours on this side of the house. Perhaps we've moved some fill up the hill a little bit to give us our slightly raised grade for the house itself. But again, this is the existing grade and the finished grade. So here's a way of thinking about it. Right, these contour lines are at 1 foot increments. So this is 852 and 853. So this guy here was, let's just say for the sake of argument, was 852 and a half. Now we've raised it to 853. So we've raised this piece of land, half a foot or so. So I'm guessing we've moved some dirt around to provide this new grade. And again, here is our easement. Again, we'll explain what that means. And our property line with a bearing and a dimension. Does that make sense? I just wanted to blow this up a little bit and explain some of those features in a little more detail. Good, thanks, Christoph. Okay, so again, that was our site plan. And let's explain what some of those terms mean, right? This is a little bit legalese, right? An easement essentially means that, let's think of it this way, you own a lot, you own a piece of property, and your property has an easement on it. Right, so on the side here, there is a 10-foot easement, right? This easement means that someone else can do something on your property even though they don't own it. What's most likely is that it doesn't say so on this particular drawing, but it might be a utility easement, right? So the electric company or the gas company may have the ability to do something in this first 10 feet of your property. The easement means that you can't build a permanent structure or a fence in that easement, so you have to stay off of that piece of your parcel even though you own it. Right, so if someone else, a non-possessory, so I took this from Wikipedia, so somebody who doesn't own your property has the right to use or enter onto your property, onto the real property of another person without possessing it, right? So one landowner may have rights over a piece of your property. The next slide explains that a little bit better, right? This is a common situation, right? A parcel of land gets subdivided. This person back here in property B is separated from the street by property A or parcel A. So this person in property B has an easement that allows them to run their driveway across property A to get to their property B. So this would be an easement here. So the person that owns this parcel here is granting this person back here the right to run a driveway across their property, even though this person owns that piece of land. Right, so this would be a common situation, right? If parcels of land get subdivided, you have a parcel that's separated from the road or the cul-de-sac, and they still need to get to their property, then they would have an easement. So the easement is granting the rights of this person to have their driveway on person A's property. All right, what's another common situation would be a utility easement. Vaughn, good question. This easement is likely to be described in the legal description of the property, the plot plan, or the plat of survey. So the plat of survey is a legal document that spells out this arrangement. You know, maybe that plat of survey describes an agreement that these two property owners made with each other, or it could be a legal description that was made when this property was subdivided, you know, before these people owned it, right? The developer realized that, hey, I need to make sure that the person who might live in this parcel has a way to get to the road. So when they develop this property, they create an easement here to allow access to that property. So that would have been done prior to either of these two people owning that land, right? It was done when the land was subdivided and developed. Does that make sense? Right, here's another common situation. Would be a utility easement. So utilities might be electric, gas, water, stormwater, right? So in this case, there's a utility easement on this side property line that gives space for the, let's say a series of telephone poles and electric lines run across this utility easement. That easement gives the utility access to their electric wires that are serving my property. So in this case, the easement says I can't put any permanent structures within the easement, so my fence has to sit, you know, on the easement line. It can't be in this area here because legally, even though I own that property, I'm allowing another person to utilize that piece of my property. So that's an easement, right? A setback. Setbacks are building restrictions imposed on property owners, and that's going to be a distance from a curb or a property line or another structure in which we cannot build. Setbacks will typically come from zoning, and we talked about zoning, I think the first or second lecture. Right, zoning is something that the municipality does that says how big of a property, how big of a house you can build on a certain parcel. Part of that description of what you can't do in the zoning code would be some definition of setback. Right, if I'm my little parcel of land here in Southeast Oak Park, let's say that I'm R 3.5 and I go look in the zoning code for the Village of Oak Park, and it's going to say on my parcel, I have to maintain a setback of, let's say 25 feet from the curb, right? So it means that nothing in my house can be closer than 25 feet to the curb. So that's what a setback is, right? Again, here's a picture. Again, this would be described by the zoning. Right, so again, we have front and side and rear setbacks. So again, our structure, whatever we're building here, can't be any closer to the property line than this setback line. And I'm guessing if we're zoning, we're also going to have some restrictions on, floor area ratio, how big of a structure that we can build on this particular parcel. So we may never be able to build up until all these setback lines, depends on the zoning. So again, those are things that you might see when you're looking at a site plan or a plot plan. You might see the setbacks and the easements, right? The figure 8.8 we just looked at, showed easements. What is a benchmark? A benchmark is a reference point to some permanent marker of a known elevation, right? That would be the reference point that the surveyors used to establish those contour lines. So it might be some permanent marker, could be something else that's whose elevation is known, right? A fire hydrant or a manhole cover, right? Some thing that the town or village has put there in which the elevation is known. So that benchmark is a reference that everything else is going to be surveyed from. So we may, in these previous couple drawings we looked at, we saw contour lines that had elevations, say 851, 852, 853. We could also reference a known elevation and have all our contour lines set in relationship to some other reference, right? Some assumed benchmark. So we could have a manhole cover that we assign as elevation 0.0, and then all our contour lines would be numbers above or below that manhole cover or fire hydrant, right? That's called an assumed benchmark. So again, a benchmark is a reference point that these contour lines or grade lines are being referenced to, right? On a plot plan or a site plan, we can also show natural objects such as trees, shrubs. We can show other human-made objects, utility poles, railroad tracks, streets, etc., etc. Right? Hopefully, like any other set of drawings, there's a legend that we can use to reference to that shows those features that are on our site plan. Right? In this case, we have legend that shows, sand or gravel. This is the legend is figure 8.9 on page 143. The site plans or plot plans we saw didn't show what the vegetation was, but that could be indicated by symbols. Right, we saw existing contour lines and finished contour lines. We saw property lines. I don't know where my pointer went to. This particular guide here says pipeline, so we might have a underground pipeline running through our parcel of land, or an electric line, a railroad track, roads, right? Those are all different things that can be shown on our site plan or our plot plan. Right, so learning to read a site plan is no different than learning to read any other building plans, right? Depending on your part on the construction team, you may need to be conversant on this. You may not need to be, but it's good to at least have general knowledge. That's certainly what I'm trying to impart on you this semester, right? If you're the excavation contractor, then you're going to have to be pretty good about reading the site plan when it shows you where to excavate and how to change the grade. Again, if you're the plumber or the electrician, it may have less relevance to you. Good question, Nicole. Who's responsible? Hopefully the specifications hopefully the construction documents will identify where those sorts of things exist. My guess would be somewhere in the general conditions, it's going to say that either the excavation contractor or the general contractor is responsible for doing a survey of the site, right? Calling Julie or Digger and identifying all those utilities. So the specs in the construction documents should make clear who is responsible for that. But yeah, there's always surprises. Someone sticks their backhoe in the ground and digs up a piece of pipe that people didn't know what are there. It probably depends. Again, if it's indicated on the drawings and the excavation contractor missed it, then it's going to be on them. If the excavation contractor duly called the Julie or Digger, and Julie or Digger missed it, then I don't know what they do there. But yes, the construction documents should assign responsibility for that sort of thing.
Thank you. Can I ask you one more question about figure 8.9? So
sure.
If you go back to that, it shows the benchmark. And then it looks like over in the right hand side where it says BM, and then it looks like an X, and then 869.75.
This guy, right here. Yep.
Yeah. How do I read that? What does that mean? So I understand what a benchmark is, but if I see that on the site plan, does that mean the benchmark comes out 869 feet?
That would be an elevation. So the benchmark means that at this particular spot in the ground, that's an elevation of 869.75 feet.
Okay.
So that would be a known elevation that either the surveyors or the contractors can work from. My guess would be that whoever surveyed the property and drew the contour lines would have referred to this benchmark as a known elevation and worked from there. So these would be known elevations.
The symbol, the triangle and the X symbols basically mean the same thing?
I believe they do, but that is a good question. I will find out the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like we are coming up to the end of the class. I would say let's do this. You can take some time for the rest of the class to do the test your knowledge in the book. That's on page 145. So feel free to spend the last 7 or 10 minutes doing that. Or if you're just itching to get out of here, you can get out of here, but just make sure that you do this work between now and Thursday, and we'll start at the top of the next class going through these questions, and I will give you the answers. And I will also post something with those with some explanation of the curve table that we saw on figure 8-1B, because it's in the textbook and it really doesn't explain what all that stuff means. So I will put that on Blackboard as well. Any other questions, folks? So again, you're welcome to stick around and ask questions, or